In today's video, I'm going to show you how to set up your bagpipe so it's the proper strength for you, regardless of your current level of playing. Stay tuned. Well, hello everybody, I'm Matt Willis Bagpiper, and on this channel I make videos to make you a stronger and more confident piper. If you like this kind of content, please think about giving the video a like, subscribing to the channel, commenting below, hitting that bell notification. I never tell people to do that enough. I also give Skype lessons if you want more personalized instruction, but more on that later. So how do you know if your bagpipe is set up properly for your current level of strength and ability? It's a good question, one I get all the time. I get lots of people asking me, I can only play for 30 seconds and my face is gone. I can only play for 2 minutes and my arm is sore. What am I doing wrong? Well, it could well be the instrument. There's a lot going on this thing. There's a lot of moving parts, well, vibrating parts. There's a lot of joints. There's a lot of things to check over and things that can be adjusted so the bagpipe is playing for you and not against you. Now, don't get me wrong, you have to have a certain amount of stamina. You've got to have some face muscles, some embouchure muscles. You got to have an arm that's strong enough to actually engage in the bag. But all that being said, we're still going to do everything we can today to make sure that your bagpipes are set up as well as they can be for your current ability. So the first thing that you always have to test is the air tightness of the bag. It can't be overstated. If you're on a leaky bag, you're on a sinking ship. It's not gonna work. So how do we test our bag? Well, first we're gonna take the drones out. Today we're using my Robbies by McGillivray and Dunbar. And these are currently tied into just a regular synthetic Bannatyne bag here. And I got some stoppers. Large stoppers for the drones and Chanter stock. Put them in there nice and firmly. And then I have my moose valve right here. Now, some people are going to have a flapper at the end of their blowpipe. I'm going to be using a moose valve. If you have a stopper at the end of your blowpipe right now, before we even test the bag, I want you to take your blowpipe and blow through it that way. Now, I don't have a valve in here, so it's just blowing air. But I want you to blow through it that way and see if any air is coming out the end of the blowpipe. If you can feel air coming out, I want you to look at how the valve is seated on the bottom of your blowpipe. Is it completely flush? If it's not completely flush, you might want to see if you can adjust it without removing any of the string. That may or may not be possible. You might actually have to rewrap it if it's gone too high. You can gently try bending the copper staple it has if it's built that way to see. Now, very gently, you don't want it to break. But if it is fully seated and it looks like it's just totally flush, and yet it's still leaking some air, I would pull it back gently and take a look at the surface of the bottom. Often, if it's a wooden blowpipe on an older set of pipes, the wood itself can become kind of porous to the point where it's not sealing completely. In that case, I would take the valve off, undo the hemp, take the valve off, and then very carefully, starting with pretty fine grit sandpaper, something like, I don't know, 400, 500, 600 grit sandpaper on a flat surface, and try to smooth it out, maybe even going up to like a 1200 or even 2000 grit to get it just really, really smooth. But if it's all porous on the bottom, it's not going to be able to make a seal. And again, you're going to be fighting a losing battle, and it's not even in the bag at this point. It's on your blowpipe. If you want to check your moose valve, now make sure it's clean. These things get kind of nasty. I have a video on cleaning. It'll be linked somewhere here. That's completely tight. I'm going to go ahead and put it in the pipes. And there's my moose tool. Okay. Blowpipe is installed. And before we go any farther, we're going to check and make sure the zipper is zipped. And it is. The zipper's fully zipped. But looking at it, it's been a while since it's been lubricated. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of the T-zip or tie-zip or however you say this. And I'm going to actually run it along one side of the zipper. Because, yeah, I don't see any of the lubrication at the back here. So it's kind of all worn down over time. And I don't want it leaking possibly from the zipper. And we want to make sure that the zipper is not a point of failure because you're having to work it too hard because it's not lubricated. So again, I'm supporting the whole structure of the bag and zipper as I hold this and pull it. And now that's nice and tight. All right, we'll close the bag up. and we shall inflate. So this is a synthetic bag. I'm just going to let it sit here. I'm going to kind of squeeze it gently with my arm. I personally don't recommend kneeling into a synthetic bag. The seams on these I don't think are quite up for it. Now, if this were a hide bag, I would actually want to do the same thing and probably actually put my body weight, like my knee, down on it and make sure that it is not leaking any air there. And that's actually going to help any maybe liquid seasoning kind of get down into the seams. But yeah, a hide bag, you kind of need to test with that kind of pressure. But a synthetic bag, I think you can do more harm than good. I can't get any more air into this bag after trying. So I know my bag is tight, but what if it was leaking? Well, again, if you have a hide bag, I would add some seasoning, and there's a video on seasoning your bag up here. If it's a synthetic bag, that's a little bit harder. You could try maybe taking the bag cover off and spritzing the outside with some soapy water and seeing if you can see bubbles forming anywhere. You could kind of listen around and see if you notice a leak. But in my experience, I have not had a lot of success trying to patch holes in synthetic bags. I tend to just buy a new one. I know that's expensive. You're welcome to try to do whatever you want. Your bag definitely needs to be airtight. That's important. But patching a synthetic bag can be quite challenging, and I don't find it works very often. All right, so we've tested the bag. We know the bag is airtight. What's step 2? We're going to test the chanter. Now this is where you can kind of see where your own strength is. So what I want to do is mouth blow the chanter. So I have it here. When I'm mouth blowing the reed, I'm putting my lips right around the wrapping. I'm not putting it around the base of the whole thing. I find that's rather difficult because it's so wide, but I'm not putting it anywhere on the cane either. It's not like an oboe or a bassoon where we're actually putting our lips on the cane. I'm going to put my lips on the wrapping of the reed itself to make the seal when I go to blow it by mouth. And what I'm looking for, my personal test is I like to play the first line of Scotland the Brave. If I can't get through the whole first line of Scotland the Brave in one go without having to take a breath in the middle of it, the reed's probably too stiff for me. So let's see where we're at. Go ahead and put my earplugs in. And don't get me wrong, by the end of that line, I was feeling a little pooped. I was pretty much out of air, but I was able to get through the whole line. So this reed, luckily for me, is going pretty well. I suspected it was. It's gotten some playtime recently. But what if it wasn't? Well, I have other videos on how to ease your reeds. There's one about non-destructive methods, and that'll be linked here. And here in a few seconds, because they don't like me overlapping these cards, there'll be one on more destructive methods. I would recommend going with the least destructive first, which involves a little bit of water and maybe your reed poker. And you're going to have to get a poker if you don't have a reed poker. There's kind of no way around it. The more destructive methods can involve some scraping on the reed with, say, a blade like this or some sandpaper to actually remove material, though I always recommend starting with the least destructive methods first. Let's try it with Amazing Grace, since I know just about everyone knows that one. For Amazing Grace, I'd go ahead and try line 2 of the tune, where it goes up to the high A's. So again, that you're kind of blowing through the whole range of your chanter. And let's see how much of that I think you should be able to get through. So if you can get through all of line 2 and both high A's without having to rush through it, I think that's also another kind of good test of the strength of the reed. I find if I could play the first half of Scotland the Brave or the first half of Amazing Grace on my chanter reed, for me, I actually feel that chanter reed's probably a little bit too easy. I want to be able to kind of lean into the bag when I'm playing, and if the reed's too easy, then I can't really do that. I don't want to have to be too gentle and too light on my squeezing and my approach to playing the instrument. But if you can't even get to the high A, if you're only getting to like that A, D, D, and you're choking on the F and you don't have enough wind, or you're already you're out, work that reed. Get it wet. Give it some squeezing, maybe do some of the more destructive methods if you need, especially if it's not a band reed. Don't ruin a band reed. This is not an excuse for your pipe major to get mad at you. But you need your reed to work for you. If you can't play that amount of time by your face alone, you're going to have a really hard time on the pipes, especially when you have drones going with it. So get your chanter reed working. Be able to get through that first line of Scott and LeBrave, be able to get through that second line of Amazing Grace, some amount of time, 8 to 10 seconds.
Also, real quick here, I wanted to say I am not interested in the pressure number of your chanter. If you have those gauges, that's cool. Maybe figure it out after the fact. It's not terribly useful. It's more useful to be able to get through that much material than to know you blow on a 28 reed or a 32 reed. And if you don't even know what numbers I'm talking about, it's the number of inches of water you're moving in a manometer. Yeah, you don't really need to worry about it. This test is easy enough. Work the reed until it's the strength that it needs to be for you to get through that amount of time. 8 to 10 seconds. Again, first line of Scott and the Brave, second line of Amazing Grace, something like that. But don't get caught up in numbers. It's not terribly useful.
But one of the other things I really like about the mouth blowing test is it's kind of showing you how forcefully you should be blowing into the blowpipe of the instrument as well. It's not just when you're blowing on this. You're going to have that much force going on the pipes as well. Heck, you're going to have more. You have 3 drone reeds going along with it if you're playing the whole thing. So now that you got your chanter set up and ready to go, time to move on to the drones themselves. So for the next step, I'm going to mouth blow each of my drones individually, and what I'm looking for is that when I blow at a very high pressure, I should be able to turn them off. That point of pressure is higher than I was blowing the chanter. I don't want these turning off while the chanter is going. So kind of have a mental memory of how hard you were blowing into the chanter to get it going, and when you blow harder than that, you want your drones to be able to turn off. This isn't meant to be a completely in-depth video on how to adjust drones. When I get one of those videos together, it'll be linked up above right here. So when I'm mouth blowing this, I want to try to put my mouth above the entire bit of the reed if possible, not just above the bridle, but the whole thing. Now, this is a rather long reed. We'll see if I'm successful with it. You can do this in the bag. I just find it's quicker to do it here. It's a little easier for me to know I'm exactly controlling the pressure I'm giving it, but it might not be possible. You might have to do this in the bag. I'm going to try to do it just by my face right now. So you can see on these Ackland drone reeds right now, they are set up a little bit too open. I couldn't turn that off when I blew my absolute hardest. So what am I going to do? I'm going to move this bridle, let's put it this way. I'm going to move it toward the end of the reed. I want there to be less vibrating tongue on the reed. I want it to take a little bit less air. And I'm going to move it, I'd say right at 1 millimeter. I moved it down. Let's see what it's doing now. It's still not shutting off, which is fine. We're just going to move it a little bit more. See, too much, shut down too readily.
Give yourself a little bit of time to do this. This might take you 10, 15, 20 minutes to get through this whole process, but that's fine. It's about making sure your bagpipe's going to be good and ready to play.
That's more what I'm looking for. It's only when I whoop at the very end that it shuts down. So now I want to, before I move on to the next drone, I want to check a few things. One, I want to check the fit of the drone reed in the seat. And you see that came out just a little bit easily. One of the things I like to do is take some black cobbler's wax. If I know it's not sitting in the seat well, and this works regardless of what you're using, whether it's, in the case of drone reeds, I tend to use real hemp. This happens to be bleached real hemp here. But I'm going to take the cobbler's wax. I'm going to take the last 6 inches or so, and I'm going to run it across until it's nice and black. So it was white before, it's black now. And this makes it quite a bit more sticky. Now, I like to leave just a little bit of a tail sticking out as well, right there. That's going to go up against the side of the string right here. That tail can help hold it in place. If the drone reed falls out, it should hold the reed. It'll be dangling in the stock, but if you take and remove the drone this direction, you can keep the reed from falling into the bag possibly. With many folks playing zippered bags, not that big of a deal. My other set of pipes have a sealed goatskin bag. That would be rather hard to get drone reeds out of. I've done it, but they're going to be coated in some seasoning most likely and kind of nasty. So first we're testing this joint. Now I want to test and make sure that this is very nice. Grab your drone bottom, grab your drone top with 3 fingers, and see if you can move your drone readily with 3 fingers. If you have to grab your whole hand and crank on it, that means it's probably too tight. You're probably going to need to take a little bit of string off, or it could maybe just need a little bit of hemp seal, which is available, but this is just the wax ring a toilet sits on. You can buy this like at any home improvement store, just put it in some sort of jar. This one, if anything, is ever so slightly too loose. I want to make sure it's completely airtight, and I'm using polyester thread at the moment on mine, so I have my thread here. I'm going to put just a little bit more on, and one of the things I'm looking for, can you see where there's the dark patches and some not so dark patches on there? The dark patches are where it's coming in contact with the top. Where it's lighter is where it's not. So I want to try to focus a little bit of this extra string on the lighter areas and see if I could build them up so that they're the same. And this being polyester, you do need to tie it off when you're done. So I'm going to go ahead and put a little half hitch on here, just so it doesn't unravel. And I'm going to put a little bit of hemp seal on here, so just a little bit on the end of my finger and around. 3 fingers, boom, that's much better. I can move it still readily with 3 fingers. We're going to repeat that on the middle tenor. All right, moving on to the bass. Now, for many people, the bass is simply going to be too long to readily be able to get in your mouth, and you might have to test it in the bag. If that's the case, not a problem. I'd keep my Chanter stock corked. I'd go ahead and put stoppers in both of my tenors, and then I would blow the bag up and see if when I kind of blow and squeeze on the bag with a lot of pressure, can I get the bass to turn off or not? If I can't get it to turn off, I'm still going to lower the bridle to reduce the amount of vibrating tongue on the reed and see what I need to do to get that to turn off. This is just short enough that I can still test it by mouth. And at my very top end, it does turn off. So I'm now going to go through, make sure that it's sitting in there well. That seems to be a pretty good fit there. That's nice and firm. I'm going to grab it here, and that feels, again, this actually feels pretty good. I'm not even going to add any hemp seal to that. That's quite nice. And then my top joint, that's pretty good. Now, on many sets of pipes, you're going to want to show just a little bit of string. I actually find on this set, I actually like it so it's just below that, not showing any thread there. But for starters, as you're getting to know your bagpipe for that bass top, I'd have it set so that you're seeing just a little bit of whatever color string. This happens to be yellow. Yours could be black. It could be white. It could be tan. Who knows? But I'm going to move mine down to where I know it works well. We've made sure the bag was tight. We've made sure our Chanter reed was at the strength we needed to be. And now we've checked our drone reeds to make sure that they can be turned off by face alone. Now, let's put them all on a bagpipe. Okay, so you have your drones in their stocks. But what's this tension supposed to be like? We talked quite a bit about what the tension was supposed to be like on this joint. 3 fingers, easy to move. This one's going to have to be more snug. Now, I don't want it so snug that you're risking cracking anything in here. There's no point for that. There's no reason to hemp it to that degree. But it should be firm. I have to twist this with a certain amount of strength. It doesn't just want to fall out. If I'm just like pushing without any twisting, I mean, it's not coming out, but if I twist it with my hand, it definitely moves. But the most important measurement in all of this is that you can take this drone top and with 3 fingers, move it with no movement of any sort down here. And it should be the same for all of your drones. It should be the same for all of them. Remember, your Chanter is actually fighting gravity. You don't want it falling out and hitting the ground. So make sure this is firm. Not so firm, it shouldn't take both hands and breaking a sweat to get it open. That's way too tight. We're not trying to hurt anything. Use a little bit of just common sense about this one being snugger than that one. Easy to turn with 3 fingers. Cannot be turned with 3 fingers, but I get my whole hand involved, and it's moving just fine. Many folks out there do play with valves. This set right now does not have any valves at the base of the stocks. They're just open to the bag. If you do have valves, you want to make sure they're properly set up. If you have the kind of valves that have elastic in them, you're going to want to make sure that they're set up properly, that enough air is getting through them. If it's the Highland Reed style valve, that enough air is able to again get through it, that it's not dialed down so far that it's really hard to get the air through. Yeah, the design is to limit some of the air that's going through the valve into the drone, but you don't want it so closed off that no air is getting through. And you might want to even try playing without the valves and see, maybe, just maybe, you don't need them as much as you might think. The thing I'm going to test next is, I'm going to blow up the pipes. The whole thing's going to be going. I'm going to go to a high A, and I'm going to kind of pop my arm down on the bag, and I want to see if the drones turn off at about the same place, because that's going to tell me that they're set up at a very similar level to each other. So after that, I might need to tweak the bridles on the drones just a little bit, and well, yeah, we'll see what happens. So you can see like that, when I pop my arm down, my drone's all turned off. If I pop my arm down and one of them kept blaring and sounding, even with that kind of pressure, that'd tell me it's too open. And again, you're going to want to move that bridle down just a little bit and test it again. You might need to do that 5, 6, 7 times. It takes a while to kind of get the nuance of how that bridle moves on your drones. But try to get them so that they turn off at about the same time. That's a great starting point. There's a lot of other small tweaks that we'll eventually talk about how to get the drones really dialed into taking exactly the same amount of air, but the turn-off test is a great one to make sure that, well, you're not killing yourself with your drones, with the amount of air going out of them. When you're playing, also remember, your arm should be constantly engaged in the bag. When I'm blowing into the instrument, I'm squeezing down with a pretty firm amount of pressure. When I inhale, that pressure increases even more. And then when I go to reinflate the bag, I reduce the squeeze, but I don't actually lift my arm. So make sure that you're keeping your arm constantly engaged. You might find that your shoulder actually starts hurting before your face if your arm is constantly engaged the way it's supposed to be. And if you do find that you're getting muscularly fatigued in your arm and shoulder or chest or back, you might want to start incorporating some sort of push-ups or other sort of workout that's going to help you build your upper body strength so that you can really, well, dig in. This is a very physical instrument. Even when it's properly set up, you have to be engaged, and it requires a certain amount of strength. And while you can certainly get that strength by bagpiping alone, well, you'll be a little lopsided. It's all going to be squeezing from one side and not the other. So upper body work can go a long way to making sure that you stay relatively balanced.
And when it comes to blowing and squeezing on your pipes, you want to make sure that the inhale phase of the whole process isn't too short. It's not Many beginners have that kind of almost like rabbit-like inhale. It should not be that quick. You want to have kind of, I always like to think of the roll-off of the drums at the top of a pipe man. And the part is when I'm blowing into the bag, and the silence is my inhale. And you can move and shift that. Ultimately, you're blowing into the bag as the bag is needing it, but especially while we're playing long tones, holding just individual notes, it could be useful to think about it in a certain amount of time, like a 2.5 to 3 count to a 1.5, 2 count of blowing in to inhaling. But you want to make sure that you give your arm enough time to kind of get that bag working, and you the time to get the air back into your body. You might also find that when you're done with your 3 count of blowing into the bag, you might still have some air in your lungs. That's totally okay. Feel free to go and then breathe back in. And I typically breathe in through my mouth, not my nose, because your nose is going to limit the amount of air you're trying to get in. So I might let that air out if I haven't expended all the air in my lungs before I breathe back in. So just some ideas on blowing, but you want it to have some sort of kind of natural sequence. You don't want to be taking overly quick breaths in, and you want to give your body some time to breathe in and have your arm really engage with that bag.
And if you do find that your mouth is failing, you might want to move on to a product like this. This is the Reed Wrangler. It's a nice flat mouthpiece. I've had to start using these for some dental issues I was starting to have. So I use these much of the time. Round mouthpieces are great for a lot of folks. Some people use the oval ones like on an Airstream and some other brands. But if you find that round mouthpiece is really not allowing you to keep a seal, think about maybe trying some of these other type of mouthpieces out that are a little flatter. It might give you a little bit more success in blowing into your pipes.
Now, this isn't going over tuning. That's a topic for another day. And beyond this, this is just making sure that your bagpipes are at a strength that you can, well, command your bagpipe.
Try all this stuff out. Go up to your bagpipe, test your chanter, test your drone reeds, test your valve, test your bag. Make sure it's all working, and let me know if you had to adjust anything. Was everything where it should be, or did some stuff need tweaking? And once everything was tweaked and properly going, did it improve your playing? I'd love to hear from you. Well, thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you got something out of this video, please think about giving it a like, subscribing to the channel, hitting that notification bell so you know when I have videos come out. I put out a video at least once a week, and I have no plans to stop that anytime soon. If you wanted to go the extra mile, you could go over to my Patreon, where as little as $1 a month goes a long way, and there are tier level gifts for your various amount of contribution, and I often try to put up these videos early so you'd have an early chance to view some of this content. If you wanted more personalized instruction, I do give Skype lessons. Go ahead and head over to www.mattpiper.com or email me at matt@mattpiper.com, and we'll get you going. I'm working with folks from all over the world, and I hope to work with you soon. All right, everybody, I'm Matt Willis Bagpiper, and until next time, cheers.